Well, I would say that reading is just the vehicle we use that helps us not only learn information, whether that's through reading, but also to express information that we have through our writing. So reading allows us to unlock that key to continued learning the rest of our lives once we're out of school, so we can be lifelong learners as we move through our lives. And we often talk about it as literacy rather than just reading, because it does incorporate both reading, writing, listening, speaking. Some of us have a lot more difficulty in learning to read. So there's a lot of research out there that shows that there is a percentage of children, a small percentage, that seem to read effortlessly. And no matter how we instruct them, they're going to pick this up, they're going to figure out that code. But, and another percentage of kids are going to learn with just minimal instruction, minimal explicit instruction. They will be able to do that. And those kids thrived under our work with balanced literacy. But there is a large portion of students, 30 to 45% of our kids, who need explicit code-based instruction in order for them to unlock the code of reading. And we need to make sure that we use a different approach with those students. And then there's going to be another 10 to 15% who really need intensive intervention to learn to read. And we can't leave half of our kids behind. And so that is why we have to really change sometimes the way we're approaching our reading instruction. That term, the science of reading, is often misunderstood and misrepresented. The science of reading is a research base. It is an accumulation of research over 5 decades about not only reading, but writing, about not only how we teach kids, but how we assess them effectively. It is found across all languages. It incorporates all languages over, like I said, 5 decades. So it helps us align practice with what we know about how the brain learns to read and write. So what's really great is that as we've been able to do more brain research and look at the neuroscience of reading, we've learned that what we thought worked with balanced literacy wasn't actually what was happening in the brain. And so the science of reading has informed our practice. So we don't just teach how we think kids are learning, but really how the brain is unlocking print from a page. And so we have realized that term balanced literacy didn't work. And actually the term balanced literacy doesn't have a clear definition. It doesn't have a clear definition in the research that we do. It was done in order to kind of assuage the reading wars. It was using a whole language approach to reading and adding some phonics to it. But that wasn't clearly defined what that would look like. And it also involves some practices like 3Qing that we now know is it's a strategy that poor readers use. Because what we thought was happening in the brain isn't actually what we've learned through the science of reading was happening. And so we know now that balanced literacy wasn't going to make the difference we needed it to make. That kids, like I mentioned earlier, they need that structured literacy approach. And so that's why KSDE has really worked hard to make sure everyone understood what structured literacy is and what does it look like in classroom practice. So structured literacy is good for any student that's learning to read, and it's critical for our students who have dyslexia. The difference between balanced and structured literacy is also that structured literacy doesn't just look at what we teach, but how we teach it. And that's really what makes the difference for our kids who are struggling readers. Because in structured literacy, we look at phonemes and graphemes, morphology, all of that we were teaching or that we are teaching. But the how, it's very explicit, very clearly defined in what we are teaching. It's systematic, there's a scope and sequence. We know the prerequisite knowledge kids need to have before we teach them something new. It's very cumulative, it builds on skills from the past. But also it's very engaging, it's interactive, multisensory. It has good feedback that's meaningful for kids. As that's occurring, it's very data-driven. So it's not just the what we teach, but in structured literacy, we really examine how we teach it. So it's that content and the pedagogy that goes along with being a good teacher of literacy. high. We've put a lot of effort into doing letters training because letters training is not tied to a curriculum. It's important that the training we provide teachers can be implemented with whatever high-quality instructional materials their district is choosing to use. And so the letters training that we are doing is building capacity of teachers to make good decisions about materials and to then implement the materials that they have. So like my team and teams at KSDE are working really hard to do professional learning to help teachers not only learn and understand what structured literacy is, but to use other training like letters training that they have to apply that to what's going on in the classroom. And then we are also providing networks of support to support them as they do that. And this goes over time, and if you talk to educators that have had it, they usually, the feedback I get is, I wish I would have known this before, but also, oh my gosh, I never realized there was so much I had to learn still. And I think whenever we do training that, professional learning that's really good, it sometimes leaves you with more questions than answers so that they will then be interested in continuing their professional learning. It is a gold standard, and it is a heavy lift to do that. Yep. The Blueprint for Literacy came out of Senate Bill 438, and it is primarily a higher education bill. One of the things it did was to try to get all institutions in the Board of Regents system and Washburn on the same page in how to prepare pre-service teachers, making sure that their coursework was aligned to the science of reading. And so it has done that. Those courses are in place right now. It also established a Center of Literacy that's managed through the Board of Regents and a director, which is Dr. Cindy Lane, who is running that work and managing that. It does also have an advisory committee, and KSDE is, we have a place on that advisory committee, and so I do attend those meetings. And I would say our role at KSDE is, first, we've provided a really strong foundation for the work that the Literacy Blueprint is now trying to carry forward through the Dyslexia Task Force and the work that was done, which is why I was brought into the position I am in. And I would say our most important role is that as a collaborative partner. So I have worked with Dr. Lane. I have tried to make sure everyone understood what we did have in place, so we know where we can come together and make those initiatives stronger, but then also to figure out what do teachers need going forward that we can build upon. I think learning to read, it's a civil right, and I believe that literacy really does change lives.